Acting like you don't care isn't about shutting down emotionally. It's not about pretending to be cold or heartless. That's the misunderstanding. People hear the phrase, act like you don't care, and think it means disconnecting from love, becoming aloof, or playing games. But in reality, it's about emotional self-sufficiency. The ability to stay rooted in your own worth, regardless of how someone else is treating you in the moment. When you genuinely care for someone, it's easy to become emotionally invested to the point where your happiness hinges on their every move. If they respond quickly, your day is amazing. If they don't, suddenly you're questioning everything. That kind of dependence feels like love, but it's actually instability disguised as connection. It means your emotional state is constantly being dictated by someone else's behavior. Now, here's the truth. Real strength is when you can love someone, care about them, even desire their attention, while still being completely okay if they don't give it to you. That's emotional self-sufficiency. It's the ability to stay grounded, regardless of whether or not you get the validation you were hoping for. And that is what people mean when they say, learn to act like you don't care. You're not becoming careless. You're becoming careful with your energy, your time, your emotions. You're signaling that you won't overinvest in people who underinvest in you. You're no longer volunteering your peace of mind just to keep someone around who hasn't proven they deserve it. Let me give you an example. Let's say you text someone and they don't reply. Most people go into a spiral. Did I say something wrong? Are they mad at me? Should I double text? Instead, what if you did nothing? What if you acted like you didn't care? Not out of ego, but out of confidence. You move on with your day. You go to the gym, finish your work, meet a friend for coffee. You keep your power instead of placing it in someone else's hands. That calm reaction, that's not a game. That's a signal to yourself that you value your own peace more than you crave someone's attention. And ironically, it's the very behavior that makes people more attracted to you. Why? Because emotional control is rare. Most people are reactive. When you're not, you stand out. Caring deeply is a beautiful trait, but letting that care consume you, that's when it becomes unhealthy. So the next time you feel overwhelmed by the urge to prove your care, pause. Remind yourself, I care, but I don't need to perform it to be seen. That's emotional maturity. That's confidence. That's power. That's what it means to act like you don't care, and do it with grace. People treat you how you train them to treat you. That might sound blunt, but it's one of the most important relationship truths you'll ever learn. Most of us don't even realize we're teaching people how to treat us every single day through what we tolerate, how quickly we respond, how much we give without being asked, and how we react when someone crosses a line. Every action you take is either reinforcing healthy boundaries or silently permitting behavior that will hurt you in the long run. Let's say someone constantly cancels plans at the last minute. The first time you might say, no worries, I understand. That's kind. Second time you say, it's okay, we'll reschedule. That's patient. But by the third or fourth time, if you're still brushing it off, now you're not being understanding. You're teaching them that your time doesn't need to be respected. Without realizing it, you've just trained them that your schedule is flexible. Your time is optional. And their inconsistency doesn't have consequences. That doesn't mean you're weak. It just means you've been conditioned to equate kindness with passivity. And people will respond to that training. This is where the power of emotional restraint comes in. When you pull back, not out of spite, but out of self-respect, you're recalibrating the dynamic. You're showing that your time, your energy, and your emotional availability are not on tap for people who haven't earned it. You're not making a big announcement. You're not throwing a tantrum. You're just responding differently, less giving, more grounded, less explaining, more observing. And that shift in your behavior does the teaching for you. Think of it like this. If someone knows you'll always be available when they call, they're less likely to prioritize calling in the first place. But if they sense that your time is valuable, that your attention isn't guaranteed, they naturally start to treat it with more care. Why? Because scarcity creates value. When people know there's a standard they have to rise to, they begin to meet it, or they fall away, and either outcome is clarity. People don't respond to what you say, they respond to what you do consistently. So if you're constantly giving, over-accommodating, and saying yes, when you want to say no, you're teaching people that they don't have to put in effort to be close to you. And here's the most dangerous part. Once they're used to that level of ease, they'll start resenting you the moment you try to change it. That's why it's crucial to set the tone from the start. Be generous, yes, but with discernment. Be kind, but with standards. Show love, but not at the expense of your self-respect. Because in the end, you are always training people. The only question is, what lesson are you teaching? Detachment isn't indifference, it's clarity. Most people confuse the two because they've only ever experienced detachment as something cold or distant, like shutting down or emotionally disconnecting. But true detachment is not about becoming numb. It's about seeing clearly. It's the space between what you feel and how you choose to act. It's where you regain power not over others, but over yourself. When you're attached to an outcome, a person, or a specific reaction, your emotions become clouded. You start making decisions not based on what's best for you, but based on how to protect that attachment. You overanalyze texts. You tolerate mixed signals. You compromise your standards in the name of potential. Why? Because you're no longer acting from clarity. You're reacting from fear. Fear of loss, fear of rejection, fear that this one person might be your only shot at love, success, or validation. Detachment breaks that illusion. It doesn't mean you stop caring about people or stop wanting things. It means you no longer need them to feel whole. When you're detached, you can want someone without clinging to them. You can care deeply and still say, if this isn't right for me, I will let it go. That's not indifference, that's strength, that's emotional clarity. Think about it this way. If you're wearing tinted glasses, everything you see is colored by that tint. That's attachment. You're seeing through your hopes, your fears, your insecurities. Detachment is like taking the glasses off. Suddenly you see people for who they are, not for who you hope they become. You see situations for what they are, not for what they could be if you just tried harder. You stop over-functioning in relationships. You stop trying to fix people. You stop tying your worth to how someone treats you. And this isn't just about romantic relationships. Detachment is just as crucial in your career, your goals, your day-to-day decisions. When you're too attached to a certain result, getting that job, impressing that person, hearing back from that opportunity, you start acting out of desperation rather than alignment. You become tight, anxious, overly invested in controlling the outcome. And ironically, that energy repels the very things you want. But when you detach, you approach life differently. You show up fully, give your best, but then you let go. You trust that what's meant for you won't require you to beg, chase, or suffer. You don't force things. You don't cling. You don't manipulate. You simply observe. And from that space of calm, everything becomes clearer. Your standards, your values, and your direction. So no, detachment is not indifference. It's the calm confidence that says, I know who I am, I know what I want, and I won't lose myself trying to force what isn't aligned. That's clarity, that's peace, that's power. Caring deeply doesn't mean reacting emotionally to everything. One of the most misunderstood ideas in relationships, whether romantic, professional, or social, is that if you care, you have to show it all the time through strong emotional responses. That if someone disappoints you, you must confront it immediately. If someone pulls away, you have to chase them. If something makes you anxious, you have to express it fully. But the truth is, emotional reactivity isn't proof of love. It's often a sign of emotional imbalance. Real care is quiet. It's measured. It knows when to speak and when to stay silent. When you care deeply, you don't need to react to every trigger because your sense of worth isn't constantly under threat. You trust yourself. You trust your boundaries. You know that love doesn't mean losing your center every time something shakes. Here's what most people do. They equate intensity with depth. They think, if I'm not showing how I feel, maybe I don't care enough. Or worse, maybe they'll think I don't. So they overcorrect. They send multiple texts when one would do. They over-explain, over-apologize, or overreact. But none of that proves love. What it often proves is fear. Fear of being misunderstood, fear of being abandoned, fear that silence means rejection. Emotional maturity is knowing that you can care without being chaotic. You can care without constantly needing to perform that care. You can hold space for your emotions without letting them dictate your actions. That's not coldness, that's composure, and it's powerful. Imagine someone hurts you. Maybe they cancel plans without explanation or give you mixed signals. If you react immediately, emotionally, impulsively, you might get temporary relief. But you've also just handed over your power. You've said, My sense of peace depends on your behavior. But if you pause, reflect, and choose a response instead of a reaction, you're saying something much stronger. I'm in control of how I show up, no matter how you do. This doesn't mean suppressing your feelings. Suppression is denial. What we're talking about is containment, the ability to hold your emotions without letting them spill over and define the moment. You can acknowledge your hurt without lashing out. You can feel disappointed and still respond with dignity. In fact, people respect you more when they see that you don't let every little shift in someone else's behavior rattle your entire world. They feel safer around you, not because you don't feel, but because you don't make them responsible for managing your feelings. That's emotional responsibility. That's maturity. That's strength. So remember, caring deeply is not the same as reacting strongly. Often the deepest form of care is the one that stays still, listens, observes, and waits until the right moment to act, because love expressed without wisdom becomes noise. But love grounded in calm becomes power. The more reactive you are, the more control others have over you. That's a hard truth to swallow, but it's one of the most important lessons in building emotional strength. Every time you let someone's words, actions, or silence dictate your emotional state, you're essentially handing them the remote control to your peace of mind. You're allowing your internal stability to be managed by external circumstances. And the more frequently that happens, the less grounded you become. Think about it. If someone doesn't text you back and your entire mood shifts, your day is ruined, your thoughts spiral, your self-worth starts crumbling. That's not just disappointment. That's emotional dependence. And it means the other person has far more power in your life than they should. Not because they took it maliciously, but because you gave it away without realizing it. Reactivity is a sign that your nervous system is tied too closely to someone else's behavior. If they approve of you, you're up. If they withdraw, you're down. If they say something critical, you lash out or collapse inward. You live in a constant state of emotional whiplash, not because people are necessarily doing anything wrong, but because you haven't learned how to respond without reacting. When you're reactive, you're predictable. You're easy to manipulate, even unintentionally. Someone knows that if they pull back a little, you'll chase. If they criticize you, you'll over-explain. If they ignore you, you'll work harder for attention. That gives them control, whether they realize it or not. And this isn't about blaming others. It's about taking back your power by mastering your reactions. Now, this doesn't mean becoming emotionless. You're not a robot. You're allowed to feel things deeply. But the strength comes from pausing before you respond. From choosing your behavior instead of acting on impulse. From recognizing that someone else's mood or mistake or inconsistency doesn't require you to abandon your center. Emotional discipline is a form of freedom. When you no longer react to every shift in someone else's energy, you regain control over your own. You become someone who can be trusted, not just by others, but by yourself. You know you won't betray your values or your peace just to get a temporary sense of relief or validation. There's a quiet power in restraint, in being able to sit with discomfort without needing to escape it, in allowing someone to be inconsistent without immediately confronting them or seeking reassurance, in knowing that your emotional world is built from within, not handed to you by anyone else. So the next time you feel that rush, the urge to respond, react, defend, explain, or fix, pause. Ask yourself, am I responding from power or reacting from fear? Because the more you react, the more they control you. But the more you pause, the more you pause, the more you reclaim yourself. Confidence is the ability to stay still while others expect you to chase. In a world where urgency, validation seeking, and constant availability are often mistaken for connection, there is something deeply powerful about stillness. The person who can remain grounded, who doesn't scramble for attention, who doesn't rush to fix every silence or every emotional shift, that person radiates confidence. Not because they say the right things, but because they withhold the wrong reactions. When someone pulls away from you, there's usually a voice in your head that says, do something, reach out, close the gap, fix it. That voice is rooted in fear, the fear of being forgotten, misunderstood, or abandoned. But real confidence doesn't obey fear. Real confidence says, if they're meant to come closer, they will. If not, I will be okay. It's not apathy. It's trust in yourself, in your value, and in the idea that the right people will recognize that value without needing to be chased. Stillness is misunderstood. People think if you don't react, you don't care. But in truth, stillness is often what makes someone care more. It's in that quiet space where someone starts to reflect, starts to wonder, starts to realize your presence is not a guarantee. When you're always the one to chase, to reach out, to fix things, people start to expect it. They begin to feel secure, not in the relationship, but in your predictability. And predictability, when it's one-sided, often leads to complacency, often leads to confidence. Means you can resist the urge to make yourself overly available. You don't rush to fill every silence with reassurance. You don't feel the need to prove your worth through constant presence. Instead, you become the person who can hold space for uncertainty, space for your own standards, space for someone else to show up without being prompted. This stillness is not passive, it's intentional. It communicates without words. I'm not here to convince you, so I'm here to connect. But only if the energy is mutual, and that message, sent through behavior rather than words, is far more powerful than any speech or over-explanation. It also protects you, because when you wait instead of chase, you give people the opportunity to reveal their intentions. You give them space to step forward on their own without being pulled. And in that space, you gain clarity about who really values you and who is only responding to your effort. Confidence isn't loud. It doesn't beg. It doesn't rush. It simply holds its ground. It knows that attention gained through chasing is temporary, but attention earned through stillness and presence is real. The person who doesn't need to chase commands more respect than the one who always runs after reassurance. So the next time someone expects you to move, pause, breathe, remain still. That stillness is not a void, it's a boundary. And in that boundary, your confidence speaks loudest. You train people how to treat you by what you tolerate. This is one of the most quietly powerful. People learn what they can get away with, not based on what you say, but based on what you allow. The problem is, many of us tolerate things not because we want to, but because we're afraid. Afraid of being alone, afraid of losing someone, afraid of confrontation, or afraid that setting a boundary will push the other person away. So we stay silent. We justify behavior that doesn't feel right. We excuse disrespect, and slowly the standard drops, not because someone is inherently disrespectful, but because we didn't make it clear where the line was drawn. Let's say you're in the early stages of dating someone and they cancel last minute for the second or third time. You might feel disappointed or even annoyed, but you tell yourself it's okay, they're probably just busy. That may seem like kindness or patience on the surface, but underneath, you're teaching them something important, that your time doesn't require consideration. You didn't need to yell or get upset to communicate that. Your lack of a boundary said it for you. People take cues from your energy. If you're always available, even when they're inconsistent, they learn that you don't require consistency. If you always initiate, even when they show little effort, they learn that effort isn't necessary to keep your attention. If you forgive disrespect without consequence, they learn that their behavior has no cost. Over time, this dynamic becomes the new normal, and you start to feel resentful, taken for granted, or invisible. But the truth is, the pattern was trained, not just tolerated. Training someone doesn't mean controlling them. It means showing through your reactions and boundaries what kind of treatment you will and won't accept. If someone is late without warning and you respectfully reschedule, instead of accommodating them, that's a lesson. If someone speaks disrespectfully and you calmly withdraw from the interaction, that's a lesson. You don't need to shout to teach people. You need consistency. Quiet, firm, repeated consistency. And here's the paradox. The more you uphold your standards, the more people respect you, and the more the right people will be drawn to you. You might lose a few along the way, yes, but those are the people who were only comfortable with you because you didn't ask them to rise. The ones who genuinely care, they'll meet your standard, or they'll at least make the effort to. So take inventory of what you've been tolerating lately. Ask yourself, am I training this person to value me less by the way I keep showing up? Because every time you let something slide, you're setting a precedent. And in every relationship, personal or professional, precedents matter more than promises. Attention isn't love, and consistency is everything. It's easy to be swept off your feet by someone who gives you intense attention, texts that feel electric, compliments that feel profound, gestures that feel cinematic. But what many people learn the hard way is that attention without consistency is just emotional entertainment. It feels good in the moment, but it doesn't build anything real. If someone's presence is unpredictable, if their words are sweet but their actions are unreliable, what you're experiencing isn't love, it's confusion. Consistency is what turns sparks into a fire that lasts. It's the follow through. It's the pattern. It's not just what someone does when they're excited or when everything's going well. It's what they do when things are quiet, inconvenient, or require effort. Anyone can send a good morning text for a week. Anyone can plan a beautiful date once. But can they show up emotionally over time? Can they be kind when they're stressed? Can they listen when you need to be heard? That's what consistency looks like. And that's what love actually feels like when it's real. People who confuse attention for love often find themselves chasing highs. They get addicted to the intensity, how someone makes them feel in burst, but they ignore the gaps in between, the long silences, the mixed signals, the patterns of hot and cold behavior. They cling to the peak moments and explain away the inconsistency, telling themselves, but I know how they can be, as if someone's best moment should outweigh their overall pattern. It shouldn't. You have to stop measuring someone's value in your life by how much they can give when they feel like it. Instead, start measuring by how they show up when it's not easy, when it's not convenient, when there's nothing in it for them. That's where real connection lives, not in the drama, not in the emotional roller coaster, but in the quiet, steady presence of someone who chooses you again and again. The truth is, consistency isn't boring. It's safety. It's emotional health. It's a foundation you can actually build on. And when you finally experience it after years of chasing emotionally unavailable people, you realize how much energy you were wasting on people who were never truly invested. If someone is only consistent when they want something, if their attention is a strategy, not a reflection of genuine care, you have to stop romanticizing that. Stop thinking you can inspire them to be better. Stop imagining what it could become. Pay attention to what it is right now. Because love isn't just how someone makes you feel, it's how they treat you over time when they don't have to impress you. So when you evaluate someone's place in your life, look beyond the intensity. Look for the pattern. Consistency doesn't always feel like fireworks, but it does feel like peace. And in the long run, peace is far more sustainable than passion without purpose. Your silence is sometimes louder than your words. In a world that constantly encourages us to explain, defend, justify, and respond, choosing silence can be a radical act of power. Not silence rooted in fear or passivity, but silence that stems from self-respect and clarity. The kind of silence that says, I don't need to argue my value or refuse to lower my standards just to be heard. When someone disrespects you, your instinct might be to call them out, to make them understand, to express your hurt in hopes they'll change. And while communication is vital in any healthy relationship, there are times when your greatest strength lies in not engaging. Because not everyone deserves access to your energy. Not every comment requires a comeback. Not every behavior deserves a reaction. Sometimes the most powerful message is no message at all. There's a dignity in silence. When someone plays games or gives you mixed signals, reacting immediately feeds that dynamic. It gives their inconsistency a reward, your attention. But silence breaks the cycle. It forces reflection. It creates space. It lets the other person feel the absence of your energy, and in that space, they come face to face with the reality that your presence was never guaranteed. People pay attention when silence replaces noise. They notice when you stop chasing. They notice when you stop explaining. They notice when you pull back, not with bitterness, but with quiet confidence. Silence makes people uncomfortable because it removes the drama. It removes the emotional stimulation. And most importantly, it shifts the power. It's easy to think silence is weakness, especially if you've been in relationships where love was proven through intensity. But silence, when used intentionally, is strength. It's restraint. It says, I have nothing to prove. It says, if you can't meet me with effort and respect, you won't meet me at all. It places the responsibility back where it belongs, on the person who crossed the line, not the person holding the standard. Silence also gives you clarity. When you stop reacting, you start observing. You start observing. You begin to see what someone does when you stop filling the space for them. Do they step forward? Do they notice your absence? Do they change? Or do they simply move on to someone else who will engage in the same old patterns? Their behavior in your silence tells you everything their words could never reveal. And in that stillness, you grow. You reclaim parts of yourself that were exhausted from over-explaining. You reestablish your boundaries. You remind yourself that love doesn't require constant defense. So that real connection doesn't demand you exhaust yourself trying to be understood. So the next time you're tempted to fill the space with words, pause. Ask yourself if silence would serve you better. Because sometimes the most eloquent thing you can say is absolutely nothing. And sometimes that silence speaks volumes. Learning to act like you don't care is not about pretending to be emotionless or shutting down your feelings. It's about mastering emotional independence, the ability to maintain your sense of self and peace regardless of how others behave or how situations unfold. When you depend too heavily on external validation, approval, or affection, you give away your power. You become vulnerable to the ups and downs created by other people's moods and actions, and your happiness becomes conditional. Emotional independence means you can care about someone or something deeply without letting it consume you. It means you can invest your energy wisely without being desperate for reciprocation. You learn to hold your emotions lightly, like observing the weather, acknowledging when it's sunny or stormy without letting it define your entire day. This balance allows you to be compassionate without being codependent, to engage without losing yourself. When you act like you don't care, you create a natural boundary that protects your emotional well-being. People can't take advantage of your attention if you're not overly available. They can't manipulate your feelings if you don't react impulsively. This doesn't mean you become cold or indifferent. It means you become selective and intentional about where and how you invest your emotional energy. Emotional independence also cultivates resilience. When rejection, disappointment, or silence happens, it doesn't derail you. You recognize these experiences as part of life, not reflections of your worth. You don't chase after explanations or justification because your value isn't tied to being understood or accepted by everyone. Instead, you stay centered, confident in your own identity and purpose. This mindset shifts the power dynamic in relationships. When you're emotionally independent, you no longer feel compelled to chase after people or situations. You hold space for connection, but don't force it. You allow others to meet you halfway, and if they don't, you move forward without bitterness or regret. This self-respect draws in healthier relationships because it signals that you value yourself and won't settle for less. Learning to act like you don't care also means you stop over-investing in the uncontrollable. You stop wasting energy trying to fix things outside your control, like someone else's feelings, decisions, or timing. Instead, you focus on what you can control, your thoughts, your reactions, and your boundaries. This focus not only preserves your energy, but also enhances your clarity and peace. Ultimately, acting like you don't care is about reclaiming your emotional power. It's about choosing yourself first, not selfishly, but wisely. It's a form of self-love that says, I matter, my peace matters, my happiness doesn't depend on convincing anyone else. And when you live from that place, you naturally attract people and experiences that respect your boundaries and honor your worth. To wrap it all up, learning to act like you don't care isn't about shutting down your feelings or becoming indifferent. It's about reclaiming your emotional power, setting clear boundaries, and choosing yourself first. When you stop reacting impulsively, stop chasing validation, and start holding space with calm confidence, you train others on how to treat you. And more importantly, you train yourself to value your own peace above all else. This mindset creates freedom. Freedom from emotional chaos, freedom from the need to please everyone, and freedom to attract genuine, consistent relationships that honor who you truly are. Remember, caring deeply is a strength, but caring wisely, that's where your true power lies.